Wonderful, wonderful. Let me do my little intro and then we can go right into it.
Okay.
Welcome to Live Nation Urban Presents the Souls of Black Folk. I'm your host, Brandon Pankey, and today we have a guest who I'm telling you is too good for our IG Live. He's here anyway. Appreciate it. Miss Nikole Hannah-Jones, and I'm going to read off some of these statistics. I memorized them, so let me see if I have everything right, and if I don't, let me know. But you are the creator of the Sixth Project. You are a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist for the New York Times. You've won a Peabody Award, a Polk Award, a National Magazine Award, James Chancellor Award for Distinguished Journalism. You are the co-founder of the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting. I think you have an Oscar and a Grammy Award too. I'm not based on everything you have, but welcome. We're super excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. A historic day for a lot of reasons. But I want to go into really your history, how you came to become a journalist for the New York Times before we start everything else.
Okay.
Sure.
You want the short story or the long story?
Whatever you want to provide. It's your world.
So I had a very typical journalism career. I started out on my high school newspaper, went to graduate school, worked my way up from small newspaper to larger and larger newspaper, and really got to the New York Times by showing that writing about racial inequality could be an investigative beat, that you could write about racial inequality not in a way that is superficial, which is what we tend to see, where people just say, Black people suffer from this, Black people suffer from that. I wanted to really show that we can write journalism about racial disparity that shows who's actually pushing the levers that maintain and create that disparity, and to actually do accountability reporting around that. So that's kind of how I got to the New York Times.
Awesome. So let me tell you how I, was introduced to you. It was actually from a friend of mine. I was looking to get my 3-year-old at the time. It was 2016. And my 3-year-old was going into school, and I was selecting schools for him, and it was a difficult process. And a friend of mine sent me a link to your article, just talking about segregation in schools. And you also, and what I forgot to say, is your MacArthur Award, MacArthur Fellowship Award grantee for your work in educational inequality. So my question is, why did you get into that? Why is educational inequality so important for you?
So in some ways, I fell into it. My first job as a journalist was an education reporter. And it's not that I was particularly interested in education, but when you graduate college, you take the first job you get. And the first job that I was offered was covering the Durham Public Schools in North Carolina. And the Durham Public Schools were a very segregated school district. And it was right around the time that No Child Left Behind was kicking in. And so naturally, if I was going to write about education, I was going to start writing about educational inequality. And I really came to understand through that reporting that education is clearly the linchpin of so much other inequality that we face. That if we're taught in this country to think of education as the great equalizer, but for so many Black kids and increasingly Latino kids, education just ensures that they will remain on the bottom where they started. And so that's what really got me interested in the realm of public education and how education, instead of creating opportunities, often constricts the opportunities for our kids.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on it slightly. Educational inequality actually leads to overall economic inequalities, because if you have a poor education, more than likely you'll have poor housing, and more than likely you're going to, not have as great of a job as you could. So it's all, unfortunately, a cycle. So I think you touched on that. So thank you. I want to go into the 1619 Project.
Okay.
I have really, really smart friends who link me to certain things. And it was a friend of mine who wanted me to look at, I believe you had Wesley Morris, and it was discussing music. I read that and I was just intrigued with else. Tell me why you wanted to create the 1619 Project, why it's so significant. And it's such a landmark, content piece. And I encourage everyone to read it. Why did you want to create that?
So thanks for that question. This week is actually the 1-year anniversary of when we published the 1619 Project, and a lot has happened since then. But last year, for those who aren't aware, was the 400th anniversary of the first Africans being sold into the colony of Virginia. So we marked that as the beginning of American slavery. But most Americans had never heard of the year 1619. A year ago, it's hard to believe, but it was not a year that was in the national conscious. It wasn't a year that most of us had been taught. And I just believe strongly that that erasure has been part of a long pattern to downplay how foundational slavery was to this country, but also to downplay the role and contributions of Black Americans and the roots of the inequality that we see today. So the 1619 Project was a chance to really look across modern American life and make these direct connections to so much of what we both love and hate about this country can be traced back to our decision to engage in chattel slavery. And the project, through a series of essays across a bunch of different subject matters, as well as original poetry and original short stories, really seeks to tell that 400-year story.
And where could someone find that in case they were looking for it?
So you can't get copies of the print project anymore. It's sold out multiple times unless you go on eBay. I'm told you can find it on eBay or Amazon for $500, but I wouldn't recommend paying that. But you can go online. If you just Google the 1619 Project in the New York Times, you can go online and read it there.
And I believe, was it Oprah Winfrey who is secured the rights to create film and television content around it?
So Lionsgate actually secured the development rights, and Oprah Winfrey is partnering with the New York Times and Lionsgate to create, yes, TV and film projects that will come out of the 1619 Project.
Awesome. So Ida B. Wells Society, tell us a little bit more about that and why that was also important. You created that, co-created that in 2016, correct?
Sure. So the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting is a nonprofit training organization that tries to work to increase the numbers of Black and Brown investigative reporters. And the reason that's important is investigative reporting is the most critical of reporting. It's the reporting that really exposes the way that power is wielded against the vulnerable. Yet it is also the widest realm of reporting. That's because it is the most expensive, it's considered the most prominent. And if we're not doing investigative reporting, then so much that's happening in our communities that deserves to be exposed isn't exposed. And I'll give you probably the easiest example is police violence. So it's clearly not, has never been a surprise to Black folks that police use their power in unconstitutional ways in our communities. And that oftentimes when people are killed by police, the official story that the police give is not necessarily the truth. But white media was not really covering the stories that way. And that's because you didn't have investigative reporters of color who were investigating this. And what the way we started covering police violence is citizen reporters, regular people who were out in their communities, were filming these interactions and then posting them on social. And they really forced the mainstream media to start covering police violence. Had you had Black people in those positions, these are stories that would have been covered a long time ago.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how would one, sign up, be a part of that? Because I think it's phenomenal. And I think because there are not, to this day, and help me and correct me if I'm wrong, enough Black and brown reporters right now, how could one be a part of the society?
Sure. So the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting membership right now is free. We really want to make sure that during the pandemic, we are providing opportunities and not obstacles to people who want to learn these skills. And to be clear, you don't have to be an investigative reporter. Students are part of our members. People who are just interested in reporting are part of our membership in order to get these skills. So you can just go to the website. It's idabwellsociety.org and sign up, and you'll get our newsletter and you'll be made aware of the trainings that we have. We're still training, they're just virtual.
Absolutely. What do you want the 1619 Project to be?
I think we're seeing the legacy right now in that we now have an entirely different lexicon in which to understand our country. When we saw the protests for George Floyd and against police brutality and Black Lives Matter, you kept seeing that 400 years being evoked and that 1619 being evoked, and people really able to make the connections between the inequality and the brutality and the economic injustice that Black Americans face today and what our country was actually built upon. So I hope that that's a legacy. And the other legacy is I really hope that Black Americans in particular are able to take away a great deal of pride that we didn't just build this country through our labor, which we did, but we also built this country through actually believing in our founding ideals and fighting generation after generation to turn this country into as much of a democracy as we can. I say in the project that Black Americans are actually this country's true founding fathers, and that we are amongst the greatest freedom fighters that this country has ever produced.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to throw a bonus question, one that I didn't have, ready for this today. Maybe, what was it, 30 minutes ago, Joe Biden selected Kamala Harris as his
Yes.
nominee. Do you have any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's clearly historic. This is the first time in the history of our country that a Black woman has been named as a vice presidential candidate for a major party. And I think it really speaks to that Black women have been the Democratic Party's most loyal base. They are the most arch supporters of the party, and it's time that that support has been recognized. But even more importantly, I just did an entire tweet thread on this. Black women in general have been the group of people who vote for the common good at the highest rates of all people. That we, as a group within our race, Black women in particular, support the social good, the common good, a livable wage, universal health care, opposition to death penalty at the highest rates of all groups. So we truly are the group who, if you want to build a greater America, you should look to Black women, because this is the role that Black women have traditionally played, that we don't vote for our individual best interest, but for our community's best interest. So I think that this is whether or not you like Kamala Harris as your favorite candidate or not, this is a historic moment for Black women. And I think so many Black women are grateful that our loyalty to the party has finally been paid off with the respect and the position that we deserve.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Nikole, thank you for making time. I didn't want to take too much of your time up, but we were excited to have you here. And just know that whatever you do, Live Nation Urban is absolutely a supporter of everything you have going moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Absolutely. You have a great night as well. This has been another edition of The Souls of Black Folk. I'm your host, Brandon Pankey. Thank you so much to our esteemed guest, Nikole Hannah-Jones. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.